transformer, current sensing switch, motorized damper, the hood, and the wall cap are the participants for this test. So everyone passed the test. Makeup air system is good to go. Since then, I've added 2 receptacles for the range and the hood, and here I am adding the bracing between the studs for more strength. There is also the code to consider. So where I live, the minimum distance between the exhaust and the intake has to be at least 3 meters apart. Now, as far as this house is concerned, there's already passive dampers installed, so makeup air isn't an issue, it's already been factored in. So then the reason for adding this particular setup is just for the 2 highest settings of the new range hood, because at 900 and 1200 CFM, it's going to need a bit more compensation. So that's the only time this will be open, and with that caveat, I'm going to put the intake right under the hood, directly in the path of the drawing air. So you might have noticed the damper sitting at the top there, between the 2 joists. That's because according to my original plan, that's where it was going to go. I had planned on cutting into the soffit, making a custom connector with this big awkward plenum design that was supposed to sit in front of the hood, which turned into this other big awkward thing that was going to sit behind the hood, but don't have to deal with that anymore. So, some measuring and math and a bunch of other figuring to get a bunch of other pieces cut, I started the framing that would serve to mount the hood and to house the motorized damper. So I already cut the opening. I'm going to use this later to make the hole in the wall. The motorized damper went through a series of modifications for the length, the height, both the shutters, the shutter shaft, the shutter seals, and some grinding for clearance so that all the components can come in tighter to the core in order to fit inside the makeup air cavity and still have enough room to function properly. So now that the damper fits, I trace the opening and drill pilot holes that I can connect from the outside. For the exhaust hole, I put the cutout back on the frame and transfer the circumference, and drill 4 holes along the lower half of the circle. Then I just connect the dots. Hi. So initially, the plan was to cover this with an edge frame, to close off the gaps on the sides, but leave the shutters exposed as is, just like the setup before. Then I thought about how thin the shutters were, and what that might mean in the winter times, and also in terms of noise level. I knew I wanted to put a cover on it, I just wasn't sure how it would work with the system. And it took about 3 dog weeks, but I finally had an idea. So these are the original sidings that I cut out. And I was thinking maybe I can turn them into a a cover of some sort. I'm being very careful here not to shift the group. I'm immediately fastening some straps. Then I'm going to undo them. But before I remove it, I make some marking guides, because it's going to need to align back exactly to this spot. And because they're already drilled, it guides the pieces back to the exact place until the glue cures. For the edge frame, I've cut out a piece of 3/4 inch plywood to the size of the hole, and with it in place, I'm tracing the damper opening. And I'm going to cut through this line with the jigsaw, rebate this part 1/4 inch with the router. And that goes in there, like that. So with the edge frame covering the opening, I'm making the top bar for the cover flap, which will get routed for the hinges. And then get the cover attached to it. Time for the pins, hinges, top bar, and the flap to get a coat of generic brown. Doesn't need to color match. You're never gonna see the inside of this. The siding edges, they're gonna be exposed to the weather, so I'm giving them a second coat. Just gotta chalk it up to being a turd and move on. So this time I'm gluing an already cut through 1/2 inch ply to a 1/4 inch ply so I can avoid the routing process. And like that, back in the game. So the damper has already been prepped with the countersink bit. I just have to mark the holes so I can pre-drill them and then ratchet in the screws. And the edge frame can now be installed, so I can scribe the opening from the other side. I got some 1/8 inch thick aluminum from Metal Supermarket. This is going to be the liner to the inside of the makeup air cavity. So again, I'm scribing the opening so I can cut it out. Made this mock-up last night. It's essentially a cam lever lift. I figure the damper already has a mechanism that converts rotation into linear motion right here, so might as well take advantage. So that's what it does. Straighten out the broken frame, cut this slit into it so the lever goes through here. So now when the shutter opens, it moves along with it. the back of the cover. There's a skid plate over it so the lever doesn't dig into the wood. So that's where it makes contact. So the mock-up works, and now I'm gonna make it for real. The lever is gonna be made out of the same 1/8 inch aluminum because it's nice and sturdy, and it's not gonna rust. And once again, the damper went through yet another round of modifications, less on the form factor this time, but a lot of components got modified in various ways to accommodate the cam lever integration. The edge framing also got some upgrades to help with the kinetics in this case. And the cover flap even, with the skid plate. Anyways, with the screen attached and all the screws swapped for stainless steel, I drilled some holes for the magnets. Alright, let's see. And now back to the hood for a bit with some weather stripping to the adapter for better seal, and also the wall cap for the same reason. And speaking of wall cap, so this is the 10-inch damper that sits inside the wall cap, and this gets pressed in as far as it can go. I'm also not going to use the overhead mounting tab. Instead, I'm going to drill through it and mount the hood from the inside. So with the hood sitting on the temporary support, I'm temporarily fastening it to the wall. This is just a number 12 wood screw. It's gonna come down one more time, but I need it up here to make the divider. More 1/8 inch aluminum getting attached to 1/2 inch plywood. And this is the divider between the exhaust and the makeup air cavity. And now that I know where it's going, I can take it back down and get the mounting holes drilled. By the way, this is the wiring between the damper and the hood. It's time to peel away the plastic, apply the silicone to the screws and to the seams. And with the silicone dry the next day, we lifted the hood back on the support for the last time. I upgraded to a 6-inch 3/8 stainless steel lag bolt and wanted to hand tighten to avoid scuffing the head. It took 14 minutes, it was unenjoyable, and I was a turd. But I learned. Looks pretty plumb. And leveled. Last bit of chopping to make sure the wall cap fits properly. Silicone the gaps. Connect the power to the damper. Fasten the damper. Install the edge frame. Install the cover. And finally, the wall cap. But I'm not siliconing this yet because I need to take this off for the rerouting job. And from the inside, I'm fastening the divider. And if you're wondering why this needs to be removable, it needs to be out of the way for the hood to be lowered or raised to this position. So for whatever reason, if the hood needs to be uninstalled, I would undo the 4 screws, take the divider out, and with the helper holding up the hood, undo the lag bolts and lower the hood back down from the casing. Final test. We got the hood plugged in here. Transformer hooked up same as the previous, but this time with the actual wires. And there it is. Range hood, makeup air, all installed and working. Next episode, I finally figured out a way to get rid of the ducting once and for all, and then I'll be framing the casing around the hood. Until then, that's about that.